Look, I think the economy has been incredibly resilient, but it is in spite of, not because of, Trump's policies that frankly have added to costs.
You're talking about corporate earnings, which is very different from a family living in, let's say, Michigan, who is going to their gas pump to maybe fill up either diesel or gas, and they are seeing higher gas prices, higher diesel prices.
Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're taking a close look at a major update on the economic and political front. CNN's Harry Anton and a panel of experts recently unpacked some eye-opening polling figures regarding how voters are currently viewing the Trump economy. The numbers being discussed are generating a lot of buzz, highlighting key shifts in public sentiment, economic confidence, and what voters are prioritizing right now. We're going to break down what these polling trends actually mean for the broader political landscape and what both sides of the aisle should be watching closely. It's a timely and important discussion, so get ready and let's see the rest of the video.
If he does tout the economy, how do voters feel about his performance on that subject?
Yeah, promises made, promises broken in the minds of the American public. Because just take a look here. The reason he won back in 2024 was because the plurality of voters thought that Trump would make them financially better off, 44%. 38% said they make them worse off back in October of 2024. Look at these numbers now. Oh my goodness, John's shaking his head off on the side. Now 58%, nearly 3 in 5 voters say that Trump is making them financially worse off. That's up like a rocket. The better off, down through the floor in a Lake Michigan. Look at that, from 44% to just 13% now saying better off. The rest say about the same. These are absolutely devastating numbers. The issue that got Trump re-elected, now the voters absolutely turn against him.
They're saying he's making them worse off.
Correct.
Just think about what this poll is actually saying there. And what do voters say about whether the economy is getting better or worse?
Yeah, I think this is part of the picture, right? Say the U.S. economy is getting worse. Look at this. Okay, back when Trump was re-elected, November of 2024, look at that. 42% of Americans, less than 50, said that in fact the economy was getting worse. Look at that now. Again, very similar numbers, 59% say the U.S. economy is getting worse. That getting better number is down close to 20%. I don't know how this works for Republicans come the midterm elections when the economy is the number one issue with inflation and 3 in 5 say it's getting worse off and just about 1 in 5 saying that it's getting better. That's an equation that does not work out to success.
And I'll just tell you, if he's going to go to Michigan today and say the economy's doing great, 60% about say it's not. And
Correct.
So that is a message that sometimes does not land well at all with voters. How does he rank historically?
Yeah, just look at this. I mean, according to the CBS poll, worst economic net approvals at this point in term 2. Who takes the cake? Donald John Trump, 30 points underwater, even worse than George W. Bush heading into those midterms back in 2006. We've spoken about it before. That comparison, simply put, does not work for Republicans.
Of course, the president's been calling for a cut in interest rates. He's got a new chair of the Federal Reserve. What are the prediction markets saying about whether that will happen?
No, it won't, most likely. Chance Fed cuts interest rates in July. We have a meeting later this week, less than 1% chance. How about this year? 19% chance, according to Cash prediction markets. The bottom line is the American people think the economy is getting worse, and what Trump wants to do, in fact, prediction market, those who are putting their money where their mouths are, don't think it's going to happen.
All right, folks, grab your popcorn because Harry Anton is back at the screen, and he is not holding back. He kicks things off with a line that sounds less like political commentary and more like the title of a tragic country song. Promises made, promises broken. Honestly, looking at Harry's face when he pulls up these polling numbers, you'd think he's reading the final bill after a dynamic-priced concert ticket purchase. He's looking at economic sentiment data, and the chart isn't just dipping, it's doing a full trust fall off a cliff. When a data analyst drops promises broken right out of the gate, you know the polling charts aren't showing a cozy upward trend. They're showing a slide straight into the panic zone. What makes this opening segment pure gold is watching the panel digest these stats in real time. Harry drops these devastating numbers, and the energy in the room shifts faster than someone trying to hide their screen when a boss walks by. Voters were promised economic smooth sailing, lower costs, and financial bliss. Instead, the polls show people looking at their grocery bills and gas receipts like they're reading a host nation's surprise tax declaration. Enton lays out the stark contrast between what was marketed on the campaign trail versus what voters feel in their checking accounts today. It's that classic online ordering versus what actually arrives in the mail moment. By the end of this opening rundown, one thing is abundantly clear. Voters have long memories when it comes to their wallets. You can spin talking points all day, but when Harry points to the polling board and shows widespread buyer's remorse on key economic indicators, even the best spin doctors start looking for an exit strategy. It's a brutal, hilarious, and deeply relatable slice of political reality, because whether you're a political junkie or just someone wondering why cereal costs as much as a dinner out, these numbers speak loud and clear. Let's see how the panel tries to unpack this mess.
It is always confounding to me when Trump is in a position where he needs to take some pressure off the economy. He keeps adding more bricks on the back of the economy, and I truly do not understand the logic, but I don't know, maybe I see it.
I think this, I kind of respectfully disagree with some of the fundamental premises there, Abby. I mean, the economy is actually doing quite well. We're in the middle of another earnings season where earnings are beating on average expectations. That makes the 9th earnings quarter over quarter in a row of earnings that have beat expectations on average.
You're talking about
corporations.
Are you talking about
corporations are doing great.
But that's an indication of how the economy is doing.
I would say the family that's going to fill up a gallon of gas that's over $4 from where it was in May does not feel
And the
that
corollary to that on the consumer side is that inflation has outpaced earnings for the last 2 months. Now, Trump on the inflation side got a little bit of a signal of, okay, you're doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. The ceasefire brought down inflation, but now there's no ceasefire anymore. So I think we can probably expect that number to start to rise again. So that's what I'm talking about, Mark. Mm-hmm. Look, I think the economy has been incredibly resilient, but it is in spite of, not because of Trump's policies that frankly have added to costs for Americans.
What the president's been trying to do, Abby, as it relates to tariffs and other policies, are to level the playing field.
Now we get to the segment where the Table for Five panel pulls out their red pens and hands out report cards for the economy. If you've ever watched a teacher grade a test when the whole class completely forgot to study, that is exact vibe sitting at this table right now. When you ask 5 political analysts to grade an economy, you don't just get a simple letter grade, you get a chaotic performance review. Watching them hand out their marks is hilarious because everybody has a completely different standard for what qualifies as a passing grade. One panelist looks at the economic indicators like a strict parent, handing out a fat F and wondering where it all went wrong, while another tries to find any curve possible to squeeze out a gentleman's C-. It's like asking 5 people to review a dinner where the soup was cold, the steak was burnt, but the breadsticks were all right. One person says, 0 stars, call the health inspector. Another says, well, at least we didn't get food poisoning. And someone in the corner is trying to argue that cold soup is actually a sophisticated European delicacy. The best part is watching the panel members react to each other's report cards. When one person drops a failing grade, the person next to them looks like they just witnessed a crime, while the person across the table is nodding along like, finally, someone said it. Every metric brought up, from inflation to consumer confidence, feels like pulling out a midterm exam score that nobody wants to take home to show their parents. By the time everyone gets their turn to speak, the consensus report card looks less like an honor roll certificate and more like an academic probation warning. It's a great piece of commentary because it shows that no matter what side of the aisle you're on, trying to grade an economy when voters are frustrated is like trying to grade a math test written in invisible ink. Let's see how they attempt to wrap up this report card session.
Long-term gain for some short-term inflationary pressure, and I think for everyone.
Wait, what do you mean leveling the playing field? Who is paying the tariffs?
Yeah. The playing field needs to be leveled.
The tariffs get shifted to the consumer, which are Americans who buy goods from countries that are being taxed, like Canada or Mexico.
So
tell me how that makes sense for American families.
The last 3 quarters of corporate earnings have not demonstrated that.
You're talking about corporate earnings, which is very different from a family living in, let's say, Michigan, who is going to their gas pump to maybe fill up either diesel or gas, and they are seeing higher gas prices, higher diesel prices, and then they go to the grocery store. So on top of the higher gas prices, then they get to get the gift of driving to the grocery store to see grocery prices higher, because guess what diesel does? It takes the goods coming off of those trucks and gets it to the grocery store.
Well. Yeah.
So yes, those supermarkets or the corporations might be getting a higher earning paycheck here, but the average family is not.
But that's not the message that I'm trying to transmit here. So in breaking down corporate earnings reports since Liberation Day, corporations have reported by and large that they are not raising prices and passing the costs.
That's not true. They absolutely are. Grocery prices are higher.
I spend most of my days pouring.
Well, I would say, I would say, look, first of all, I do think that some corporations, the larger ones, are able to absorb some of the costs, but some of the costs are still being passed on. And when it comes to grocery prices, that's where the Iran war starts to come into play, because you've got fertilizer and nutrient and some of the basic fundamentals of farming going through that part of the world. That's not going to get resolved anytime soon. Right. And that's part of the picture that Americans are facing.
Now we hit one of the most contentious debates in the whole discussion. Should Americans accept short-term inflation for long-term gain? This is the classic economic dilemma, but when you put it in front of everyday voters, the theory breaks down pretty quickly under real-world pressure. From a policy standpoint, proponents often argue that short-term economic pain, such as temporary price spikes or tariff adjustments, is simply the cost of restructuring trade, protecting domestic industries, or building a stronger long-term foundation. The logic suggests that taking a bit of medicine now yields a much healthier economic picture down the line. However, as the panel highlights, that theoretical argument faces a massive hurdle when it hits household budgets. Telling average consumers to tolerate high inflation today in exchange for a promise of prosperity tomorrow rarely lands well. When people are paying significantly more for groceries, gas, rent, and everyday necessities right now, theoretical future benefits do very little to relieve immediate financial anxiety. Politically, this creates a major vulnerability. Elections operate on short cycles, whereas structural economic shifts take years to yield visible results. Voters judge an administration's performance based on their current purchasing power, not speculative future gains. The panel's breakdown makes it clear that asking the public to hold out for a long-term economic payout is one of the hardest sales jobs in modern politics, especially when confidence in overall economic management is already strained.
No, I think that's absolutely right. You mentioned Liberation Day. I think part of the issue with the tariffs in particular and Trump's desire to keep going back to this well is that they've been instituted, they've been repealed. There is profound uncertainty. I don't know that it is at all obvious that the tariffs have a great deal to do with corporate earnings as we've seen them. And importantly, there is a great deal of uncertainty about the tech sector, which has been a huge driver of those corporate earnings. And there are big questions about the future for NVIDIA, for Anthropic, for OpenAI. For Tesla and SpaceX. SpaceX goes out with this boom and is suddenly trading below what it opened at. Those are huge, huge red flags. There's lots and lots of concern out there. And the fact that consumer sentiment is already flagging while corporate earnings and people are continuing the message about, actually, the economy is good, actually. It seems like any moment you have politicians and pundits who are saying things are actually pretty good, when in fact people feel otherwise, is probably not a good moment.
Joe Biden's
the widespread nature of the dissatisfaction is going to be a real issue here. For Trump, his handling of all these issues is deeply underwater among in this poll of registered voters. His job as president, 61% disapprove. Inflation, 73% disapprove. That's an amazing number. 67% disapprove of his handling of the economy overall. 66% disapprove of his handling of the Iran war. And even immigration, 57% disapprove. Americans are also reporting that the costs are causing them serious hardship. 34% say a serious hardship. That's up 8 points from a year ago. There is a real problem, and we've talked about this. I mean, some of it is just, how do people feel? How do people feel? Yes. But I also think that people don't like going backwards. They don't like taking a step back. And where they were a year and a half ago, the day before Donald Trump was inaugurated, by all these different measures, inflation was lower, gas prices were lower. That's what they're looking at, and they're saying, this is not what we're supposed to be doing here.
And the easiest thing that you can point to and say, wow, I'm paying too much for this thing, is if you're driving and you see the gas prices, because that is just, it is the number one, the simplest thing to see. It's advertised on the highway. You see it when you fill up your tank. This is politically challenging, 100%. And we're talking about that question of the feelings. All of the sentiment indicators that we have, if there was an interesting study on some of the kind of forward-looking sentiment from studies coming out of the University of Michigan, and right around 2020 to 2022, the predictive value of those in politics just diverged. The question of whether or not we're living in a vibe session, where again, unemployment rate is fine. It is right near target. Inflation is, it's higher than we'd like it to be, but it's nowhere near the levels that we saw even 4 years ago, let alone 30 years ago. Right? So the way in which our registers are unable to account for, we'd like this to be better, but again, it's been much worse. That's not great. But there's no sense, we're unable to get that calibration. I think that's the frustrating thing, is the understanding of, well, what would the alternative be? If the other party was in office, well, let's just see, right? Well, we didn't like this guy, so let's
play that out. Let's play out the thought experiment. What would the economy have been if Trump were elected, but he had not instituted Liberation Day tariffs? He had not gone down that road. He had not launched into the war in Iran. And that is actually the counterfactual that I think a lot of Americans are thinking of. They voted for Trump thinking that he would kind of build on the progress that was being made. And then he made some really key decisions that they strongly disagree with, and that is what you're seeing in these.
I think if Trump, I think to the point that you made of just, if he had not taken all these steps with tariffs, the war, all of this administration would be looking very confident going into the midterms with a very, very strong economy. And to all of your points, I think you're pointing out the fact that inflation is sort of on target, unemployment is sort of on target. The problem is, and this is something that we wrestled with in the Biden administration, is we told people, but the economy is doing really well. But it turns out when people, but the economy after the pandemic was coming back and was doing better. And we told people that. And the problem is that when you tell people that, they need to trust you that it is going to continue to get better. And to your point, they drive by the groceries, they drive by the gas station, they're on the highway, and they see those prices. Then they go to the grocery store, they get their electric bills. It's just not a reality for people.
The consumers have no patience, unfortunately. There's no economic patriotism. There's no sense in these modern times of okay, this sucks right now. My wish I wish groceries were down. I agree with all of that.
I think Americans are asking, why on earth do I need to sacrifice in this moment? I think that's a fair question too.
Now we reach the portion of the video where the panel tackles one of the biggest lightning rods in modern policy. Is Trump's tariff strategy actually working? Asking political commentators to agree on tariffs is like asking 5 people to agree on the best temperature for the thermostat. Somebody is going to be freezing, somebody is going to be sweating, and everybody thinks the person touching the dial is out of their mind. The discussion gets delightfully chaotic because tariffs are the ultimate economic double-edged sword. On one side, you have the argument that tariffs act as a bold protective shield for domestic manufacturing, forcing trade partners to the negotiating table. But on the other side, the panel points out the immediate side effect. Consumers end up taking the hit at the cash register. Watching the analysts try to measure whether the strategy is working is comedy gold because every single metric depends on who you ask. If you ask a domestic factory owner, it's a masterclass in economic leverage. If you ask someone paying double for imported construction materials or daily goods, it feels like paying an extra tax on existing. When you look at this entire video, it paints a vivid picture of the current political and economic landscape. Harry Enton kicked things off with some truly eye-opening polling data, showing how deep voter frustration runs when promises don't align with bank account balances. The panel then handed out some harsh grades for the overall economy, debated whether anyone actually wants to endure short-term financial pain for speculative long-term gains, and capped it off with a fiery breakdown of tariff strategy. The overarching message? While high-level economic theories sound great in speeches, voters judge success purely by how far their dollar stretches today. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown and commentary, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.